Learning Python for data science can really go a long way in elevating you on your career path. But for most people, learning the code can be really scary, and it doesn't have to be that way. So in today's quick video, I'm going to share with you my 7 easy tips for learning Python for data science. And be sure to stay to the end because that's where I'm going to show you how you can take this new skill of yours and start attracting would-be employers or clients. For the very best data leadership and business building advice, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you'll be first to know when the next episode drops. And as far as why I'm qualified to tell you anything about learning Python for data science, well, through my partnership with LinkedIn Learning, I have successfully educated over 1 million of their students on how to use Python for data science. So you could say I know a thing or two about Python for data science. And if you're new around here, hi, my name is Lillian Pierson, and I support data professionals to becoming world-class data leaders and entrepreneurs. Also, thank you to everyone who's supporting the community by leaving comments and requests for topics. I really appreciate all of the comments, and it's going a long way to growing this channel, so thank you. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to give you 7 easy tips for learning Python for data science. But I broke these tips down into 3 main categories: skill building tips, lifestyle tips, and practice tips. So we're going to look at skill building tips first. Under skill building tips, there are 4 main skill building tips I have to share with you. One of them is about your learning vehicle. In other words, the method by which you learn, whether that's courses or books. We'll talk about it in a minute. 2 is developing your computational thinking. 3 is data structures and algorithms. And then 4 is Git and GitHub. So let's get to it, yeah? So one tip for learning Python for data science as quickly as possible is to choose a learning vehicle and then stick to it from beginning to end. So it's really easy to purchase an online course or buy a book and say, okay, I'm going to learn all of these methods, I'm going to learn everything in this book, and then only read a portion of it and then put the rest away. Well, that's not going to take you as far as it could as if you work your way all the way through before picking up your next learning instrument. So I like to call courses, books, anything that is you're learning a skill from, learning from a vehicle. So of course, if you're looking to learn Python for data science, there's free YouTube videos. There's a whole course on Python for data science on YouTube. You can take that if you want. I haven't taken it, so I'm not going to recommend it just because I don't know. There's a lot of stuff floating around on YouTube, and I don't recommend things unless I've done them. The other option is online courses and books, and these 2 I have done. I have online courses and I have books, so I'm going to make recommendations to you, but not just on my products, but on other courses and books that I've taken that I found really, really useful. Just to get this out of the way, in terms of Python for data science courses, LinkedIn Learning has a whole series, Python for data science, essential training 1 and 2. Those are my courses. Over 1 million students have taken them over the last, 5 years, and everyone seems to love them. So those are there for you if you'd like to take them. I would say also any of the courses on Udemy by Kirill Ermenko and Hadelin Pontevillas or Jose Portillo. They have a whole series of Python for data science courses that are really great too. And I took those courses when I was first learning, and I found them really inviting. Like the Coursera course, I started that back in 2013, and it's by Andrew Ning, but I didn't find it that inviting. I found it more like a weed out course for like if you're a freshman in college. So I really like the ones over on Udemy. They are easy to start with from the very beginning, and they don't make it more difficult than it needs to be. I also had that mission with my course, so I think you would find it very beginner friendly as well. Another option is, of course, something a lot of people are talking about is the Google Data Analytics Certificate by Grow with Google. So this isn't free, but it's low cost, and you get a certificate. So it's like $149 to test for the certificate, right? And you basically will get the whole range of skills you need for data science. The only problem with this one is that they teach you R instead of Python. So you wouldn't want to use it for learning Python, but if you're looking to get the whole range of skills in data science besides for Python, yeah, it's a great place to go. So just know that's out there. Also, for these recommendations, I'm going to leave links below in case you want to check any of them out. Now, in terms of books, I have a book I've been the author of since, 2015, Data Science for Dummies. So this is a great place to go to learn the basics of data science. In particular, we just came out with edition 3, so it's all about data science strategy, data monetization, and data careers, these sorts of data science careers, these sorts of things. So you can check that book out. But then other books that I have read that I really like actually is in the Dummies series. I really like the Python for Data Science Dummies book. And, it's all about using Python for data science. And it's just super easy to pick up right away and get going without having to go get a PhD in statistics. So I like that book. And I also like the one by O'Reilly, Hands-on Machine Learning with Scikit-learn and TensorFlow. That book is pretty darn awesome. So these are great places to go to also get going with learning Python for data science. And my number 1 tip here is just once you decide on your vehicle, just stick with it. And put all of your effort into going through one course or one book and don't switch paths, because you'll end up like me with like 100 different online courses that, I've only taken like 30% of them. So that's not going to help you. And I wouldn't recommend it. The next tip for learning Python for data science is really just to start developing out your computational thinking skills. This is one of the things that you will build as you practice. You will build as you practice, which is why I recommend practicing coding every single day. You need to start learning to model your thinking patterns after the way a computer thinks. And so, really experienced programmers are going to have their computational thinking is going to be intuitive. But for people who have never coded before, it's something that they need to work on. They need to develop as quickly as possible. Speaking of learning to develop computational thinking for Python for data science, you could break it into the following 4 steps. So first step, imagine you have a problem and you break that problem. The first thing is to break that problem into manageable sized chunks. The next step would be to evaluate your data and look for similarities and differences as well as trends and patterns in your data. Then for the third step, do some exploration and develop an efficient solution to the problem. Then step 4, once you have solved the problem manually, you would then go and code a sequential process for solving the problem on autopilot. This is what people like to call an algorithm. The best way to develop your computational thinking skills is, like I said, just to practice coding on a daily basis. But if you want to take a course, there's a free course by Google called Exploring Computational Thinking, and they've got a whole curriculum they put out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well. And if you're really uncomfortable with computational thinking, you can go there just to get started in order to kind of warm up to learning how to think like a machine. Moving on to data structures and algorithms. A data structure is essentially the object or the container in which data is stored. So an example would be something like a list or an array. So say you have a series of numbers between 1 and 5 that are not in sequential order. You could say the container for these 5 numbers is an array. And then as for an example of an algorithm, you could run a sorting algorithm and sort them in increasing order so that the output ends up an array of values between 1 and 5 that are sorted in increasing order. So that's a very simplistic example of data structures and algorithms. Honestly, there's a lot more to it though, so I would say just head over to Tutorial Point. They've got some pretty extensive documentation and support for learning more about data structures, and I'll put a link to that in the description below as well. Once you've mastered the basics of Python for data science as well as data structures and algorithms, then it's time to get your hands dirty with a little bit of Git. Now, Git is a collaborative environment in which multiple programmers can share files and make changes to the same shared code base. Once you're working on larger data science projects, you'll need to know how to use Git. So to try and give you just a very basic introduction, there are 4 main things I wanted to discuss here, which was the remote repository, a local repository, commits, and GitHub. When you're using Git, you and other developers will be making changes on a remote repository. You can think of this sort of like a Google Doc that has been left open to a group of users for writing and editing purposes so that anyone can come in and make edits on a collaborative basis. And in terms of what's a local repository, I've got a guest expert here. My husband, who's been a software developer for 20-something years. Can you come and explain what is a local repository? My husband and guest expert, 25 years you've been a developer?
21.
21 years he's been a developer. So can you tell me the difference between a local repository and a remote repository on Git?
One runs on your machine and the remote one runs somewhere on the network.
And the local one can show you the difference between the remote repository and what you've actually done, right? Kind of tracks changes?
Yeah, well, usually you're probably a local one, you're probably talking about your local copy, so you make changes and then you push them to a remote repository. Right?
All right, very well. And can you tell us, what is comments?
What is what?
Comments. We're talking, see, look here. We're talking here, we've got comments.
Oh, it's just a change. You change something and it's, you write a summary of the changes you made, and it's a commit, and then you push it. So it's like, when you change things, it always goes in batches of commit 1, which you do this and that, and then commit 2, you change this and that, and then you can see it in your change history.
And then also there's a nice functionality with the comments that you can do like an auto playback. So if you mess up, you can return back to where you were before, and you know that your mess ups are not saved. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, you can. Yeah, of course, you can revert to any point in the past and check things. yeah, usually you break something and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to find out when exactly this happened. And yeah, that's what you do.
One last thing. Have you ever used GitHub to put a CV on the internet?
No.
But do you have a coding portfolio there?
Well, I have some projects there. Well, yeah, and I have a link to my GitHub profile on my CV, so people can just click
And you
and go
teach
there.
people on your Git, do you document enough to teach people how to do what you're doing, or you just use it as like a portfolio and place to save your own stuff?
No, I just like, there are some projects which are not related to my legit work activity, so something I do in my free time, which is not copyrighted or anything. Yeah, and I just put it there for other people to use.
Yeah, and I used to put on my GitHub like some stuff from my course where people could go and get the code, some data that they could run access from anywhere in the world. All right, but you can use GitHub for your CV, and you can use it to build a coding portfolio that can help you get hired. And also you can use it to teach other coders. Like Jake Vanderplast has a data science coding portfolio, Python for data science, and man, he must have taught millions of people just through his GitHub account. But yeah, that's the basics of Git, and thank you so much for joining us, a guest expert, because he's an amazing developer, and I'm just a data entrepreneur. Thank you. And I'd love to hear from you. If you tell me in the comments below what type of video content you'd like for me to create for you next, then I'll promise to put it in the queue and reply back. Okay, now we're moving on to the practice tips I have for you. And really the practice tip is that you really have to start practicing every single day, because you can take online coding courses and you can learn to do Python for data science pretty simply, but none of it's going to sink in and be something that you can use quickly on the job unless you practice on a continual basis. And so in terms of how to get practice, you can either build your own projects, which is actually what I did when I learned Python for data science, or you can go over to Kaggle. So these are two options. In terms of building your own projects, you can find things that you're working on at your day job that you could automate. Start using your Python for data science skills, your Python or your data science skills, to either create efficiencies in your daily workflow or to automate stuff you're already working on. So this then will give you the chance to get on the job data science experience and build your skills without you having to go get a new job as a data scientist or something like that. If you have a hard time thinking of ideas for projects you could build, there's a really cool course called Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. It's over on Udemy, and it will basically walk you through all sorts of daily tasks that typical knowledge workers do that you can use Python to automate. Or if you're really creative, like my husband was saying, he's got a bunch of different random stuff that he's working on that he builds just for fun, and then he puts it in his repository on GitHub. Another place you can go for practice problems is Kaggle. So Kaggle is a competition platform it's owned by Google now, and they've got all sorts of real life projects that they're open sourcing, or they're crowdsourcing. So they're opening up the problem and the data set and allowing anyone in the world to practice data science in order to solve the problem. And then whoever wins the competition and creates the best, most efficient solution wins money. So maybe $10,000, $50,000, this sort of thing. So, eventually you could do practice and win money on Kaggle. But another thing that's nice about Kaggle is they've got tons and tons of like really standard de facto learning situations, like Titanic. The Titanic practice problem is on Kaggle. Anyway, there's tons of like standard de facto practice problems on Kaggle. So honestly, if you went to Kaggle and just looked at other people's solutions to those problems, you wouldn't in most cases need to. It would go a long way towards learning Python for data science and, just practice and stuff like that. Those are my two tips for getting practice. And the third thing is just do your best to, if you're wanting to be a professional programmer and you're just getting going, then do your best to start practicing every single day. And if you're liking this video on learning Python for data science and you think you might want to check out Kaggle, go ahead and watch this video I created with Owen Zhang on how he won the Kaggle competition. I think it was 2017 he won. Anyway, he did a whole interview on what he did to win, and I'll leave a link to that video in the cards and also in the description below. So if we have made it to the last batch of tips that I have for you in this video, and these are of course the lifestyle tips. So actually though, I kind of didn't follow my script as much, and I talked about the daily coding in the last section, but yeah, you just want to be practicing every single day so that you can start developing out your computational thinking and just build your skills. And this is when coding and being a badass programmer is something that it's like you will be doing it for the rest of your life. Like it's never ending. I'm going to show you what you can do to start using your newly developed skills to attract would-be employers or clients. And that's actually this last tip here, which is to create a record. And so, of course, like creating a journal or something is nice to look back on, and you start seeing over months and years how your approach has improved and you've just gotten a lot more efficient. And so a journal would help. But if you can go ahead and create a blog or a coding portfolio like over on Kaggle, where you also practice explaining your code, communicating and teaching the data science you're doing with Python. You do a good job at that and you're solving problems that potential employers need to solve. They have recruiters that are just combing GitHub and Kaggle and Stack Overflow looking to hire people with particular programming skills. So if you create a blog or create a record of the work you're doing in learning Python for data science, that is, if you're doing it every single day, coding and then blogging or creating a video like this, that's going to attract lots of employers and lots of jobs. I know that firsthand just because when I first learned data science back in 2012, I didn't know Python, and I was completely open about the fact that I am teaching myself data science, that I'm not experienced, that this is just me recording my learning journey. And within just a few months, IBM was already paying me to write for them, and I got a job from the United Nations doing an evaluation on the Zatari refugee camp in Syria. It's like, it just opened up so many opportunities in my career, and all I did was blog and document my learning process. So I would definitely, if you think you want to do Python, use Python for data science in any sort of career venture in the future, document it somehow, a blog or, a coding portfolio or YouTube, something like that. Those were my 7 tips. And if you are digging these 7 tips on learning Python for data science, then I know you're gonna love my ebook called Badass's Guide to Breaking into Data. It tells my story and then also shares recommendations for learning path. And basically it's an elaboration of what we covered in this video. So that ebook is free. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. We also have a free Facebook group called Becoming World-Class Data Leaders and Entrepreneurs. I will leave a link to that in the description below as well. And if you like this video, be sure to show it some love by giving it a thumbs up and tell me in the comments below which of these 7 tips was your favorite.